True story means about as much as Diet Coke in the grand scheme of movies. And just like the drink, despite being bandied about with enticing, shiny packaging, it is a watered-down, tasteless concept absolutely riddled with hot air. At the end of the day, both are still full of the full fat and fakery that they pretend they're not associated with. No one needs the anxiety-inducing fear that comes with thinking Slender Man is lurking in the forest, or that The Conjuring's Bathsheba could be stalking the corridors of our own homes. But audiences eat it up all the same. We willfully buy into real events, for horror movies in particular, to make them that much more scary. But just how liberal are these films being with the truth? The answer, more often than you'd expect it, is very. From tugging on reality like Stretch Armstrong to outright lying, there are plenty of films out there that pull the wool over our eyes with their filmic trickery. So let's take a look at what really went down. I am the sleight of hand behind Ash from What Culture, and these are 9 true story horror movies that tricked you into believing them. 9. The Blair Witch Project. There is no getting around a list like this without a hearty nod to the granddaddy of film fakery, really. So here it is. The Blair Witch Project is the OG movie that toyed with audiences' heads, a proponent of the found footage genre that shot the filming style to fame by packing it full of more shaky cam than you could, well, shake a cam at. And the film's success was largely born from the fact that nobody knew it wasn't real. Filmmakers Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick framed their movie in the widely reused style of a true story, with the documentary gone wrong format and found footage style reinforcing the idea that this wasn't as much a film as it was a plea to find 3 people missing in extraordinary circumstances. Myrick and Sanchez used internet marketing to their advantage to push this even further, releasing the film alongside staged interviews, a website populated with fake police reports, and their own version of a documentary on the Blair Witch that supported the fictional horror story. Couple this clever manipulation with how little people knew about internet technology in 1999, and they soon had audiences flocking to cinemas to watch a real-life paranormal encounter play out on screen. It is one of the most infamous tricks in the horror genre, and rightly so considering its cultural importance. 8. Snuff. Playing into the urban legend of these types of film in general, the rather on-the-nose title of Snuff made waves in 1976 by selling itself as an actual snuff movie, leaning heavily into the idea that it featured real deaths on screen as a sneaky marketing ploy. Interestingly, however, the film didn't start that way, as it was originally intended as a cheaply made exploitation film that depicts a murderous cult wiping out a circle of friends visiting South America. Producer Alan Shackleton sat on the title for 4 years before releasing it when he heard rumours of snuff films being made in their South American setting, recording a new ending that sees the film crew dismember a woman in an actual murder. After throwing in an abrupt cut that plays into the unexpected nature of the footage, Shackleton then decided to remove all of the credits related to the title to really seal the deal. As if that wasn't enough to draw audiences in, he got fake protesters to picket the cinemas showing his film too. Funnily enough, the rumours surrounding the snuff kills still get brought up, despite the whole thing being revealed as fake the same year the film actually came out. 7. Faces of Death. Another 70s movie that is completely of its time, Faces of Death has long been remembered as a film banned in numerous countries around the world, taken away from public consumption for its depraved dealings in death in all of its forms. Whilst it was always exaggerated quite how malevolent the footage was, and quite how banned the film actually managed to get, Faces of Death prided itself on bringing the real experience of death in anthology format. Everyone loves a bite-sized portion of murder, right? In actuality, Faces of Death used pieces of footage that it then built a mythos around in order to make the whole thing seem like the real deal. One of the clips in question is of the aftermath of a grisly road accident that sees a cyclist being cleaned up off the road, with the other killings in the movie built around this central gruesome premise of its reality. It does contain plenty of true documentary footage and real clips, but Faces of Death isn't what it pretends to be with its padding of stage sequences. 6. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One of the most infamous movies of its kind, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre has long been regarded as a golden child of the slasher genre, despite simultaneously being one of the biggest cons of the whole true story phenomenon. Really, there isn't any good trickery or intelligent craftsmanship going on here, as Tobe Hooper just outright lied on the opening cards to get a larger audience interested in his chainsaw-wielding maniac movie. As if that wasn't enough of a sell on its own. Despite Ed Gein being the loose inspiration for Leatherface, and Tobe Hooper's own wishes to cut down Christmas shoppers where they stand during the holiday season serving as the influential choice behind the chainsaw, everything else is fictionalized. Even the remake of the movie continued this trend by branding itself in the same way, though Hooper has afterwards clarified his choice as being a subtle dig at the government lying to people about the reality of world events. I guess there's just something inherently believable about a murderous, skin-wearing psychopath living in the backwoods of Texas ready to chop up any unfortunate teams that come his way. Or something like that, anyway. 5. The Devil Inside. Another found footage horror that leans heavily into the suggestion of its framing that it is based on a true story, The Devil Inside had people fooled with its fake documentary format that devolves into an abrupt, unfinished ending. Apparently born from research the filmmakers undertook into Possession, which revealed real-life exorcism classes in Rome, the actual overarching story is one that has been fleshed out through fictionalization. Even the possessions they claim the story comes from have never been specifically revealed. What made The Devil Inside that much more believable for audiences, however, was that it relied on a cop-out ending that saw the footage end abruptly, and watchers directed to go to a website for more information on the ongoing investigation. Having a place dedicated to the false narrative under the pretense of having to wait for the rest of the real-life events to unfold was convincing enough for many that it was actually a true story, despite being a load of hogwash and just a bad film to boot. 4. The Fourth Kind. Yet another movie that played into the conventions of mockumentary found footage, The Fourth Kind is an investigation into missing persons cases in Alaska, portrayed through factual-style presentation and reenactments of supposedly real happenings. And like many of the other movies on this list, the studio decided that slapping the true story tag on it wasn't quite enough to truly immerse audiences into its spooky endeavors, so took matters into their own grubby hands. Universal Pictures decided to fabricate promotional material from real newspapers, using Alaskan name titles on their fake stories about missing people. Amongst others, the Nome Nugget was exploited for its regional journalism, which the state took great offense to, filing accounts against the studio in protest. Most upsettingly, the film plays into the reality of there being FBI-investigated missing persons cases in the area, but paper maches over the issue by sticking their science fiction explanation over the top. They were forced to pull the stories and pay a fine to the Alaska Press Club in the end, but not before the true story effect had spread like wildfire through audiences the world over. 3. The Strangers. Seeing something like The Strangers offering itself up as based on a true story is a bone-chilling experience, since the fear of aimless violence and systematic home invasion is enough to set anyone's teeth on edge. Understandably, it is particularly easy to believe The Strangers when it tells us it is real, since things like this can and do happen every day. Its basis in the tangible is what made audiences blindly follow where the true story led. But in reality, no such horrific stalking story ever took place. The closest the story gets to telling the truth is director Brian Bettino's inspiration being drawn from a somewhat similar experience. And I quote, "As a kid, I lived in a house on a street in the middle of nowhere. One night, whilst our parents were out, somebody knocked on the front door and my little sister answered it. At the door were some people asking for somebody who didn't live there. We later found out that these people were knocking on doors in the area, and if no one was home, breaking into the houses. It's close enough to the titular Strangers' own because you were home modus operandi, I guess, but still a world away from murdering vacationing couples in cold blood." 2. The Amityville Horror. One of the most famous paranormal cases there has been in America, the Amityville Horror has long stood out as one of those stories audiences want to buy into thanks to the closeness to the novel source material and America's own supernatural heart. But take a look closer at the original story and it is not hard to see the discrepancies begin to shine. The film's own trick came from such a well-documented backstory, of which the Lutz family moved into an Amityville home for a bargain price, thanks to a big old murder spree that saw off the previous DeFeo family residents, only to be terrorized by a demonic entity for their trouble. Has the devil not heard of the state of the property ladder down in hell? Give him a break! The Lutz family had their story taken and told for them time and time again, but specific details just don't add up. For example, damage is said to be dealt all across the home's hardware and original fittings, but the family that moved in afterwards has confirmed that their home has no such markings. Police were apparently called too, but no record showed them ever being called out. Eventually, the DeFeo family lawyer admitted they made it up in a drinking session for profit. Well, There goes the most infamous ghost story in the game. 1. Alien abduction and incident in Lake County, aka UFO abduction, aka the McPherson tape. The McPherson tape is a curious movie that never made it to the mainstream in the no man's land between Cannibal Holocaust and the Blair Witch Project. Instead, circling through word of mouth and in actual UFO conventions for being a true story put to VHS about alien abduction. The film is all home video, grainy goodness as a family celebrates Thanksgiving before being taken away by alien figures. Interestingly, the McPherson tape wasn't actually released as intended, as the master copy of the original movie, titled UFO Abduction, was lost in a warehouse fire which director Alan Alioto then wrote off and moved on from. The film is actually a bootleg copy of UFO Abduction, released with the beginning and end credits cut off it to make it appear authentic, discovered by Alioto and then remade into an actual movie with a bigger budget once he heard of its infamous reputation in extraterrestrial enthusiast circles. Those who saw the movie in its original time period claimed its authenticity as it closely follows other reports of other real people that claim to be abducted, a result of Alioto's close research into the topic when making the film. Of course, once the bigger budget movie was made, the network that funded it couldn't help but meddle. They shortened it from 2 hours to 1 and removed the advert cuts to again incite believers into taking it as gospel, before then releasing the full remade movie as Alien Abduction and Incident in Lake County. This was then regarded as a cover-up for the original tape, because of course it was. In reality, the aliens are children in rubber suits, but hey, let them have their fun.